Thank you all so very much for taking this most delightful trek with us. Today's installment is about Section 31. In fact, this is Section 31 Saturdays. I'm honored to serve as your host, Jermaine Watson, joined by my co host, Andy Garcia. Andy, please welcome yourself to our audience.
Hey, Jermaine, thanks for the intro. My name's Andy Garcia, and I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan, and your co-host in this journey on Trek 31 Section 31 Saturday. Sorry to step all over that.
No, it's all good. It's all good. We're new to this, right? So it's okay. It's okay. So
Yeah.
considering that, since we're new to this, what we would love for you all to do is we would love for you all to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Okay? Do it, do it, do it. Like right now. Like, subscribe, and share. All right, good. So today we are going to cover Section 31. Yes, we all know the confirmed rumors that they are working on a Section 31 series. Our episodes, however, will mainly focus on what we currently know about Section 31. And to do that, we must start from the beginning. The first time we as fans heard of Section 31 was on Deep Space Nine, Season 6, Episode 18, titled Inquisition.
Yeah, and of course, we know that during this season 6 that our friends from DS9 are fresh off the war with the Dominion. Paradise is lost, and they reclaim DS9, but now they must deal with the moral dilemmas and consequences of wartime. Themes like organized crime, whether to support an ally or not, and how that will affect the greater good. Collaboration and oppression ring wild. But another dilemma for the crew is whether the Federation and by extension Starfleet should be operating in these gray areas.
All right. So to start us off, what we did was we broke this up into three major themes, right? Some themes we're going to talk about a little longer than others, but there are three major themes that we're going to talk about. The first one is basically what is loyalty, especially what does loyalty to the Federation mean, as opposed to what? So in the episode, what we see or what we hear over and over and over again is Agent Sloan basically telling Bashir that loyalty, his level of loyalty, Bashir's level of loyalty to the Federation is strong, right? And so I guess when I hear that, Andy, what I'm hearing is, oh, Bashir is very loyal to the Federation. But my question is, as opposed to what? Now, yes, we are starting from the beginning, but we have the wherewithal to know that there are other things happening in the Star Trek world, right? And so we've seen Discovery, right? And we know who all gets involved in Section 31. And so I guess my first question is, how loyal does someone have to be if they're willing to accept a Klingon operative as the head of Section 31?
Um, yeah, it's a great question. I think in order to unpack that, well, you know what, it's interesting because the Klingons are actually pretty quite loyal, right? Um, they have an extreme code of honor that they follow, right? And so I think they're actually perfectly suited to be the head of a organization that's based on loyalty.
True, but the Klingon Empire does not the Federation make. So my
Yeah.
question is like, like while it is very true that Klingons are very loyal, I guess
Right.
the question is that whose loyalty would someone have to have? And so specifically as it relates to Bashir, could his loyalties be divided? And Section 31 would say, that's okay. That's okay. We
Yeah.
still want you.
Yeah, it's interesting because it almost at towards the end of that episode. So to unpack that episode real quick for those that are uninitiated, this is we find our medical officer on his way to a medical conference when they discover that there's been some espionage on the station. Right, so they shut down the station. All the senior officers are dragged into their quarters and not let to go meet with anybody else. And then our camera focuses in on Dr. Bashir, the entire time because he had been captive by the Dominion, I believe it was, and held with Engineer O'Brien. And now his loyalty is brought into question because not only because he spent time with them and he could have been turned, but also, and this is an interesting thing, because he's an other now, right? He's It's been discovered that he's genetically altered, right? And that there is this sense of where do your loyalties lie, with the Federation or with these, or with the genetically modified, and there's this distrust. And if you look over to Discovery, who do we run into? But is it Vok, right? Um, he is also not. He is also another. He is genetically modified. So there's kind of a parallel theme there. Not sure if that. Maybe I'm the only one making that connection, but maybe there's something to be desired by this Section 31 in people that are not the norm, but they have to be very careful.
Yeah, well, on that particular question, I would say that Sloan actually liked Bashir because he was genetically modified.
Right.
It really meant that he was smart. It meant that he was very capable. He was likely much more. Even though they said it in a previous episode, he's not as strong as others because they wanted to focus more in on his mental abilities. But definitely, he's probably still stronger than your average human.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think for all of those reasons, I think that having him be part of Section 31 was very appealing to Sloan in my mind.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're running this sort of organization, you're probably always on the lookout for unique abilities outside of the norm, and people that can think outside the box, which is very true of, say, organizations like the CIA, FBI, or organizations we don't even know the name of. Right? They're always looking for people that are outside the box thinkers.
Well, I don't
In
know.
my
Well,
opinion.
okay. Well, yeah. I don't know if I agree or disagree with that. What I do know is that they typically don't like people who are involved in organizations. They think that people who are involved in organizations already have their minds made up, and so if he like definitely believed in the Federation, his mind
Hmm.
is already made up. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so like I don't disagree with your statement at all. I don't, but at the same
Hmm.
time, that's kind of like what the CIA looks for: people
Yeah.
who
So
are unaffiliated.
right. So if you think about it, right, if you look at this episode, they're trying to see if they can break him away from that loyalty, right? In a way, make it. They're forcing him to question his own consciousness, right? Because they trick him into thinking that he was, uh, transported to this other ship, and there's the enemy is trying to convince him that he is also, his memories have been suppressed, and all of that is there. It just needs to be unlocked with the key, and he never quite buys it, right, in the episode, right, and that's why they he short circuits them and is able to kind of escape out of this program they have him in.
Oh,
But
for a second, I thought you were going somewhere else. Yeah, I think so. Definitely, I think like they were trying to convince him of one thing, and he was just like, "Nah, that this didn't happen. I didn't do these things." And even if you say I've done those things, still wouldn't
mhm,
happen. I still wouldn't have done those things. You know what I'm saying? Like he
right,
like for him, it goes back to his core, like who he is as a person, as a human being. And so he's like, "Nah, like I wouldn't have done those things." Um,
yeah. So in a sense, that is the loyalty. He never really abandons it, right? He starts to question: is this, like, he puts it together? This isn't real, right? And it's up the smallest detail, but still, he never really gives in. And I'll be honest, if I had that kind of like experience, I'd be like, oh, maybe I did, maybe I am a traitor, right? maybe, Maybe I am. I guess I'm not a good candidate for the CIA or the Section 31, but
No,
Bashir, he passes with flying colors, I think.
so the closest thing is like I don't know if like anyone has ever lied on you before, but like
Mhm.
when people have lied on me or when they believed in their heart that I did something and I didn't do it, like
Mhm.
I'm listening to them, and of course it's like you're hearing this and you like this is some bullshit. What the fuck are they talking about? Like this never happened. It's so funny that you think that like I did this and then this all I didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you got to kind of like hear what everyone is saying and then just like break it down like like a house of cards like this is some bullshit. Like nah,
Yeah.
this didn't happen.
An interesting tangent is I used to be a hiring manager. I used to work for Anheuser-Busch, and I used to manage a sales team of about 70 people. And that's why I was constantly in hiring mode because people would come and go, and sometimes we'd have to let people go. So we were always we were always recruiting, and we were always kind of in hiring mode and interviewing. And after interviewing several hundred people at that point, I stopped caring what was on their resume, and I was only interested in what they were saying. And that's a lie, actually. I was interested in their what was on the resume only to make sure that what they were saying in person matched what they were saying in front of me. Because when you're in an interview, you might be nervous, right? You always have to give the person the fact that they might be nervous about being there, and because it's high stakes. But the only thing I was interested in at that point is catching them in a lie, right? Right, because I can teach everything else, but I can't teach integrity. So I was only interested if they would lie to me or try to bend the truth. Bending the truth was a little different than say an outright lie. And so it's interesting because I was looking for a certain thing, and that was integrity because I couldn't teach anybody that, right? And if I sensed that they were lying, I was like, I'm not interested in this person, right?
It's so funny to hear you say that because when I think of the Obsidian Order or
Mhm.
Tal Shiar, oh well, I guess I'm just kind of like I'm putting the cart before the horse. Um, in the episode, Odio, Odo basically says like Section 31 is very similar to the Tal Shiar and the Obsidian Order, and even if you look at the character Garrick and
Mhm.
even the people that he brings into the show DS9, all of these people are skilled liars, right? And so it's kind of like Section 31, you would assume that people who are associated with Section 31 are skilled liars as well. Not necessarily, like I haven't necessarily seen that from Section 31 itself. However, they are certainly prone to bending the truth, so to speak.
All right. And they need to be skilled at it.
Hmm.
They need to be skilled at it, right? In order to live in that world, to operate in that capacity.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on. Let's move on. All right. So the next thing that we really wanted to talk to you all about was so now that we have talked about loyalty to the Federation. What does that mean? You know what? That was another thing. So part of what I wanted to bring out in this segment was the fact that he kept saying loyalty to the Federation and not loyalty to Starfleet, which had me thinking, like, So Section 31 was part of Starfleet's charter, right? He mentions this in this particular was it this particular episode? I think it was.
yeah,
He
it
mentions
was.
it
Mhm.
in this episode. And so who created Starfleet? It was the Federation, right? So because he keeps saying loyalty to the Federation and not loyalty to Starfleet, it makes me wonder, even though they don't answer to Starfleet and they don't necessarily answer to the Federation, I wonder if at some point there's a realignment and they do answer to the Federation president.
Perhaps you know, it's interesting to right. So we're dissecting this. It's interesting because we're sitting here dissecting this episode, right? Because we're introducing a concept that they're introducing for the first time, and they're not necessarily sure it's going to come up again ever, right? So it's kind of a make 'em up, right? We're making this thing up out of thin air, And then now we're sitting here like dissecting it, where before, maybe up until this point, writers for any of the Trek series, the movies, the cartoons, the novels, the word Starfleet and Federation is switched
Almost
back and forth.
synonymous. Yeah.
Yeah, they're synonymous with each other. But now that we're sitting here analyzing this, yeah, it makes sense to say you have, like, for example, if you had the United States and you had the U.S. Air Force, right, or the U.S. Army, versus, like, say, the CIA, they're all under one. They're all part of the U.S. defense, but they don't intermingle, right? They don't. What the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing in this case, and so taking it back to Starfleet versus Federation, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, there can be like there's Starfleet, but there can be like this like other organizations that operate under the same umbrella of the Federation. But I mean, it's a complete surprise to Bashir, right? Like his world is crashing down because not only does he discover that there's a secret organization, but it runs counter to all the values that Bashir knows and that all of us know as Trek fans. Um, it runs against it, right? It runs against the grain, and it kind of like blows your mind. It opens it up to all these this realms of possibility of what is possible, um, even though it was created by the same. This it had the same origin.
You know what? That was actually, Andy, an excellent segue into our next section. So the next section, or segment rather, is explore what is meant by another branch of Starfleet intelligence. So, so what's his name? Goodness, Sloan does a really good job of explaining the fact that it's just another branch of Starfleet intelligence, and so if if Section 31 is another branch of Starfleet intelligence, could there be more?
Yeah, there could be, right? There's can be a whole spectrum of stuff, and it's interesting because I actually went back and watched that part again because I wasn't sure if they if he had said it's another part of Federation or part of Starfleet, but he
You caught it
specifically,
too.
yeah, he specifically said Starfleet, right? So I went back and I was like, oh, okay, so that's it's interesting because now Starfleet can be anything, and it's an interesting organization because just like in the real world or in our history, um, you know, you sometimes need organizations that can do things that are under the table, right? And Starfleet being what it is sometimes handcuffed by what it can do by the Prime Directive or just general orders and the culture that is the mainstream Starfleet, and you need that too. But it's interesting that to see that now there's this acknowledgement that yeah, sometimes we put that away in order to be practical and to win, to win in extreme times of chaos. And we see that I think we see that, and this is one of the things I wanted to bring up in the Omega Directive in Voyager, right?
Remind
Do you
me.
remember that
Remind me.
episode?
Remind me.
So remember they're cruising along one in this episode, and all of a sudden the Voyager just automatically stops. Boom, and then like this Omega symbol comes up on all the screens, right? And there we discover that there's this Omega Directive where there's this particle, and Janeway knows about it, and she has to go and destroy it. It like all things stop. The Prime Directive is suspended, right? And they have to go destroy this thing. That's this perfection. Remember, 7 and 9 is like, oh my god, this thing is perfect, and how dare you ask me to destroy it? But it's such a big deal that everything we know about Starfleet protocol and Prime Directive is suspended to go destroy this thing, right? And so we know from that episode that it's possible within the realm of Federation that they say, okay, sometimes we have to break away from our ideals in order to survive, right? In order for the greater good, I guess you would say.
And so, like, another thing that I wondered was in that moment, Sloan, if in that whatever reality, whatever time Sloan lived in, perhaps the time cops were operating. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And perhaps the time police, time cops, time police, whatever they call.
Hmm.
Um,
I think they're called
Perhaps
the. Sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 no. Correct me.
What were they called? They were called the temporal something.
Temporal
Anyway, sorry,
police.
I don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So perhaps he was operating during a time when they were active
Hmm.
within Starfleet.
Yeah.
It's just different things that make me say, like
Right. Yeah, and who's to say the temporal police, or I know we're butchering this, the temporal police may not even be under Starfleet, right? They might be a completely other. We don't know, right? They don't ever say it. We just assume they are, but
Mhm.
it might not be, right? Yeah.
All right.
So.
And so, like another thing, so like towards the end, and you said it, and this was before we started recording. It's really like maybe the last 5-7 minutes of the episode where we really, number one, learn about Section 31, and then everything that we're talking about right now all comes from the last 5-7 minutes of the episode. So basically, Kira was just like, "Hey, we don't even know how you got off the ship."
Yeah.
um like we checked the transporter, like we checked for all of that, and we have no clue. And so perhaps they have some type of technology that we don't know about. And so I guess, like, my question is, what technology do they have? I know that we can't necessarily like say definitively this is what they have, but there was something, I don't know if it was something I saw or something I read, that basically said that they try to keep information for as long as they can, or technologies for as long as they can, so they can use it, and then once it becomes necessary to share, that's when they share it.
Yeah. Hey, it's an interesting concept, and I think throughout the history of man, right? When you have an advantage, you keep your powder dry until you absolutely have to use it, because the second the gun was created, and you're fighting, you bring a gun to a knife fight, right? The other guy's gonna figure out how to make a gun. And so if you have an advantage, if you're smart, you keep it under wraps until you have no other choice. um, there's this concept that I'm going to bring in from another show that I like to watch called The West Wing,
Mhm.
where they discuss espionage, right? And this might have been a made up scenario, but there was this episode where they talk about how they broke Russians' code, right? And when they did it, they never talked about it, right? Until years later, because they were saying, like, when you break someone's code, you don't want them to know, right? You don't broadcast it, because then you get the advantage of understanding, looking at their stuff, for as long as you want, until they figure it out. So.
Same thing happened during World War II.
Right.
They had it took them a while, but they figured out the Germans' code. Right, there was a code that they had, and so they figured it out. And so there were some times when they allowed certain losses. They
Right.
knew their own people would die. They allowed for it. And
Right.
then other times, like strategically, when it met their advantage, that was when you know they use it,
Right.
and the Germans were none the wiser.
Right. Yeah, they had to sometimes, in order to preserve the secret that they had discovered their codes. Right. It was that machine. Right. They made a movie about it.
Hmm.
About, right,
Hmm.
that they figured out off based of the Heil Hitler word. Right. They
Uh-huh.
were able to use that as a
Uh-huh.
key. They
What's his
had.
name? Benedict Cumberbatch, another
Yeah.
Star
Yeah.
Trek alum. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. It was a great movie. But yeah, you have to keep it close to your vest. Even what they discovered, like going back to when France had the cannon, right? And and they were like, yeah, we have all these other great cannons, but we're going to just use these little wimpy ones until you figure out how to make them, and then we're always going to be one step ahead. So going back to this episode, yeah, they have um well, do they? Because Bashir figures out that he's in a simulation, right? So there's a part of the episode where they're like, oh yeah, they timed it perfectly. They took him when they coincided their them taking him when
He was
they
supposed to be at
he's
this.
supposed to be at a conference. So did he ever actually go to the bridge, or what is the control center? I don't know what they call it in DS9, but did he ever actually
Ops.
show up there, or was he already inside the holodeck when he wakes up at the beginning of the episode?
When he wakes up at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, so remember at the beginning of
Oh,
the
oh
episode,
so
he's asleep
yeah, yeah.
and he goes through his morning routine
Uh-huh. When he
and he's
woke up
getting
and he felt tired.
yeah, and he's like, man, I feel tired, and he drops the pen, remember, and then they're like, oh, all senior officers report to, I forget again, I'm forgetting what they call it in this. I don't know if they call it the bridge. Um, is he already in the holodeck, or
Yeah,
at that point? Yeah,
yeah. From the
yeah,
moment that he woke up, that was
right.
when.
So do they? So my question is, do they really have advanced technology, or did they just trick him? Right, because the whole entire simulation, they're saying, oh, they must have something that we can't detect, right? But is that the simulation, or is that the real Kira saying that?
No, because at some point he had to get off of DS9.
Uh
There
huh.
was they had nothing showing that he left. Right, he
Uh
didn't
huh.
leave in a he didn't leave in a ship, and there were no he wasn't transported off. So
Hmm.
they must have taken him off in some
Gotcha.
way.
Right. So then they had something that they couldn't trace.
Right.
Yeah. So and it might be one of those things where
We'll
they're
never
gonna
know.
we're gonna see that again in Disco, and in when we get to those programs.
So okay. So this is my thing, right? And who is it? Manny. Manny vehemently disagrees with me, but this is what I think. I think Section 31 has the ability to move back and forward in time. I believe that.
Maybe.
I believe that, and I think that you maybe not using that technology, but using some other technology that at that particular moment in time in the Federation, they have some technology that can't be traced, right? And so it's quite possible that they use this new technology to transport him.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, going back to Voyager, the Doctor's mobile emitter, right? Look at how outmatched they were in that episode against their own technology, but like, was it 400 years gap? Yeah, they're bound to have something that just doesn't work, right? Like and that's one of the things I really enjoy about those episodes when they go back or forward, when they're like, oh yeah, your stuff works here, but it doesn't match current technology. But it's that tenacity of the crew that gets you to overcome it. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, so in terms of technology, what else would they have? Like they were able to trick him. Um, in like they were able to create hollow like holograms that I'm assuming they're pulling information out of his memory, maybe. But then, what I'm saying, like, how do they get like a lot of that information?
Well, I don't think that it's from his memory, and the reason I say it's not from his memory because the incident with Miles O'Brien and his shoulder. If they
Right,
were
right,
pulling
right.
that
Yeah,
from
that's
his
right. Yeah,
memory, then
yeah.
they would have known that. I think it
R-
was like observations and maybe records from the.
Yeah, and also Cisco was off, right? Like the way Cisco was talking. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, sorry.
Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like that
Like,
whole interaction with
mhm.
Cisco, I was like, something's not right.
Like this isn't Cisco, right? This
Mm-mm.
is to his point, Cisco would have at least heard him out, right?
Hmm.
But he goes immediately to
Worst case
accusing
scenario.
him. Right, exactly. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really it's funny when we decided to do this. When I thought about Section 31 was out there in my mind, but it wasn't like this. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like in my field of vision. It wasn't on my radar. It was kind of like on the outskirts. And now that we're kind of taking a deep dive into it, I'm kind of excited about seeing what they're coming up with next, right? So
'Cause really, like section 30, like we could go all over the place, right?
yeah,
Like,
because they can break the rules, and that's kind of fun, right?
and they can make some connections that we probably never would have made, or
Mhm.
even like what I'm so excited about is, um, I really want a show. So this is part of the reason why I like Next Generation so much, was because though we didn't have all of the answers to why the Federation and the Klingons just didn't see eye to eye, we we got a whole lot more information than we got from the original show, right? And
Mhm.
so I want to hear more about the Romulans, especially since Nexus. We saw the movie with Nexus. We also see Picard, and so there's going to be, and also with Discovery, there's a reunification between, not a reunification, but a unification between, I guess Navarre now, and um, Vulcan slash Romulans. But I would like to know the backstory. What is the backstory with the Romulans? And even, yeah, I read it in books, right? So like you can't see it, but I have like books and books and books and books and books that I read when I was in high school and college that I didn't know. Some were canon and some were not canon. I was just reading because it was fun. But I would be interested to know what led up to the schism between the Federation and the Romulans.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting. Before I forget this point, though, I want to go back to the idea. If Section 31 can do whatever they want, and they're not reporting to anybody, and they're not held to Prime Directive or whatever else, it creates an opportunity. And if they can space travel, time travel, I should say, it can tie all the different universes together, right? Like all the stuff that we complain about that we don't like because it's not canon, it can stitch them together, right? And think about this: if Starfleet training and Prime Directive keeps us from taking advantages of entities like, say, like the Q, right?
Mm, mm,
Right, like if you're Section 31, you don't have those handcuffs,
hmm.
right? And you can, if they show up and they want to bargain with you, who's to say you can't, right? And why wouldn't you if it's for the greater good? So
Especially, yeah.
yeah. So anyway, that's
No, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. I just wonder. That's kind of like we have What If Wednesdays. This is an
what.
excellent plug for What If Wednesdays. What if Q made a
Yeah,
deal with Section 31?
yeah. Can you imagine, right?
Yeah. Oh, by
Wolf
the
three,
way.
Wolf 359. You
Oh,
know.
completely different outcome.
Yeah.
Oh, but who's to say that Q wouldn't have made a similar deal with uh with oh Jesus, with the Borg?
Right.
Would they have accepted it? I mean, the Borg with the Borg. I mean, they would have tried to assimilate Q. Don't you think?
They would have tried it. They're not. When you watch Voyager, you realize how kind of single-minded the Borg is. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, pun intended, right? They're not interested in learning stuff. They just want to assimilate everything, right? So, how do you assimilate magic, basically? I don't because I don't think it's technology, right?
Or would they assume that there's some type of science behind it?
Maybe. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Who
wonder. Like, I
knows?
wonder. I like. Have they ever assimilated not a trill, but what is Deanna's race?
Oh, she's
A
Beta Z.
Beta Z. I wonder. Have they ever done that? And like, would would that Borg still
Would
be
that
able to?
would that create chaos? Right?
No.
If they suddenly had empathy.
What if?
You just see all the cubes explode, right? It's funny though.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. All right. So let's move into this is like an immediate joke. Let's move into the last segment. All right. So towards the end, Benjamin Sisko, I forget who asks him a question, and so basically he says Starfleet doesn't acknowledge the existence of Section 31, but they don't deny it either. And you can see how it's affecting Captain Cisco at this particular
Hmm.
time. And so it's kind of like, like, how dare they? Like, this is a possible cover up, and you could tell that, at least for Bashir and for Cisco, this rubs them the wrong way, right?
Right.
Like, I am not struggling to get into their headspace, but for Kira and Odo, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, of
Yeah.
course.
Right. Yeah, especially Kira, right? Because she's all rogue before she's all domesticated now, right? And on a space station where she was a rogue fighter and she was the rules didn't apply. Um, she's very she's very uh uh she's very wild, I guess, at the beginning, right? And throughout the series, she's always bumping up against authority and like, why are we going to all these lengths to do these things in like a formal way when we can just do it the way we used to do it and just get it done, right? And that's like half the fun with her, right? Is that she always kind of gives in, and every once in a while she goes off on a tangent and just does whatever she wants. But so yeah, she's having a hard time putting it together. Like, why is it a big deal at all, right? This is just the way things are done. It's the way the world is, or the universe, I should say. But,
So, what struck me was, like, going back and watching that episode, right? So I'm watching this episode and I'm thinking to myself, hmm, like, in other show, and I don't know what show it was. I just remember, it might have been Voyager, when when they started talking about Section 31, Captain Janeway was like, hmm, like it was no surprise to her, but everyone else seemed not surprised, but like, what are you talking about? But Janeway was like, I've known about this. And maybe it wasn't Janeway, maybe it was some other captain that I just can't think of, but I remember it happened within Star Trek. um
I don't recall, but it wouldn't surprise me if Janeway was that reacted in that way, just because Janeway's such a operator, right, and kind of knows um, Starfleet command directives inside and out, right? And you gotta imagine that, at least, like, if you go back to the Omega Directive, all the Starfleet captains know about the Omega Directive, right? So there's certain things captains know, right? And they're on, they're classified. You're not supposed to talk to them, not even with your number one, right? You're so, but yeah, I don't know. It's a good we'll have to watch all the series again just to find out that one point. It'll come up. It'll come up.
so when Cisco is, like, clearly, visibly, viscerally struggling with the idea that this rogue agency is operating within Starfleet,
Yeah.
and clearly, Bashir is going through the same things as well.
Right.
Like,
Which is kind of cool, right? Because I've said this before amongst our group, is that Starfleet, there's always this third character, like, not third character, but there's always this character amongst all the series, and that's Starfleet code. Not just the actual code, but the code of honor that you expect. Um, all the series, and maybe not the newer ones, but in all the older series, like Voyager, DS9, Enterprise, and the Next Generation, etc. It's kind of very predictable in how they're going to react, right? Like, so for example, alien race or alien enemy threatens to take the ship, and they're pretty close to doing it. The captain or the second in command is going to blow that shit up, right? They're gonna they're gonna give the order to self destruct, and
mhm,
it's coming, and there's something so cool when it does come, like, that you're so happy to see it. Like, yeah, you thought you had us, but I already knew that
mhm.
we were gonna blow this ship up, and there's not, and that's the it's like we're willing to go to this to this extreme. You're not getting this shit. It's so predictable. It's almost boring, but I love it when I see it. And it's like a third. It's like a third. It's like this character that just lives right. It's the code of honor. You know they're not going to bend their ideals to to get out of some bad situation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Which, it was the very last comment that you made. Like it reminded me. Oh my goodness! It's the very next episode that plays after. What's the title of this episode? Oh my goodness! You know,
Inquisition.
Inquisition. My memory is bad, man. So the next episode, I can't think already. I forgot the title of it. I just watched it today. So basically, it is basically Benjamin Sisko, and he's just talking about like basically how he how he got the Romulans into the war, right?
Uh-huh.
And so it's kind of like, oh wow, what are the depths? What are the lengths that I'm willing to go to end this war, right? He bribed people, he lied, you know what I'm saying? Like, these are not things that people in Starfleet would do, and yet he had to do it.
Right.
Otherwise, it is very likely that the Federation would have lost.
DS9 and Enterprise share this, right? Because
I'm glad you brought
in
that up.
in Enterprise we're seeing the formation of this culture that I was just alluding to,
Hmm.
right? It's the you can see the sketches of the framework are there in Enterprise, but they're fully fleshed out by DS9. And if you look at like I try to look at like DS9, Voyager, and the Next Generation as a trinity,
Hmm.
because they're all kind of
Very
operating
similar.
in the same space and
Mhm.
time, or same time more or less. And we see we see the bending of those rules as far as they'll go with Cisco, right?
Hmm.
Because they have to do things. You do things during war that you wouldn't normally do, because if you lose, then your culture's over,
Hmm.
right? And the other guy's writing the history book about how
Hmm.
the war went. And so I think in wartime, and you see that in Discovery as well, when Lorca is talking about like there's things that you have to be able to do during wartime, right? And so we're seeing them revisit that concept, and I think it's a kind of a universal thing. And if you're not willing to do those things, then you might lose, everything. And so going back to Section 31, sometimes you have to have guys that sneak around in the dark in order to make sure things go the right way for your team.
It reminds me of when, so my undergrad degree is in political science, right?
Hmm.
So, there was a time when the United States didn't. We tend to, on the world stage, people tend to say, "Oh, the United States thinks that they run everything." Well, guess what? Before it was the United States, it was the United Kingdom, right? And that was partly because of the amount of money, the strength of their navy, the influence that they had on the world stage. Well, after World War II, it was very clear that the United Kingdom wasn't running anything. It was very clear that the United States was primed to take their place. The United Kingdom basically had been trying to connect with the United States on two different issues. First, the United States needs to take its role on the world stage much more seriously. Stop thinking
Hmm.
about self-interest and start thinking about interests of the globe. And reluctantly, the United States started to take that role. But the second thing that the United States needs to do was, believe it or not, because the United States didn't want to do it, the United States did not want to have what we now call a CIA.
Hmm.
The United Kingdom had to trick the United States into understanding that it was important to be involved on the world stage in that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Um, it's interesting. I'm gonna quote The West Wing again. There's a great episode where the president is going to retaliate for an attack on the U.S. Right, and his generals bring back like, okay, we're going to hit this satellite installation and we're going to hit this airfield, etc. and the enemy had shot down an airplane with the civilians in it, right? And
Mm,
he's pissed, right? He's like, "What is, and they're like, it's a proportional response, right?" And he's
mm-hmm,
like, "What's the good of a proportional response, right?" And he starts later on in the episode, he starts talking about how in during the times of Rome, a Roman citizen could walk free, protected only by the veil of saying, I'm a citizen of the Roman Empire, right? Because
mm,
anybody who hurt a Roman citizen, the Roman army would show up and just devastate them, right? And so, they talk about this concept about how you have all this, the U.S. military has all this power, and yet they're not allowed to use it because it's what a responsible superpower does, right?
mm-hmm.
And so, um, in order sometimes to get back at those people, or to do it without, to get revenge, or to rescue somebody, or to um, kill somebody that did something, they have to do it like on the low, right? They have to do it
Mm-hmm.
on the sly, because otherwise they'll, the world community, and the world, and it's so weird, right? Because the world community knows, okay, don't do it with your large army. Do it over here with these guys that you like. If they
When
get
we're
caught,
not paying attention, we're
right?
not paying attention.
I don't want to see it.
It shouldn't be in the papers.
Right.
Our reporters shouldn't report on
It shouldn't trend on. It shouldn't be trending on Twitter, right?
it. And so, it's amazing. Like I remember, like Andy, I don't know how old you are, but like I remember during 9/11, like shortly after
Mhm.
9/11, when we realized, this is what was happening, this is who did it. Like everyone was just like, kill him, just kill him, just
Yeah,
kill him. And and when finally, all those years later, when it happened, like no one was like remorseful or anything like that. Like it was what he deserved. You know what I'm saying? That that was how we felt. But I like think about like all the different things that led up to that, where the United States public didn't necessarily like everything that happened, and yet all of those things were necessary to get to that point. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
so it just reminded me of something that you just said.
yeah. I remember that time. I remember 9/11, and I remember in those months. It wasn't even a whole year, but in like the first 6 months after the attacks, they could have bombed anybody they wanted. They could have pulled out a list of, like, they could have had a list like people we want to bomb, and they could have bombed them, and we would have been like, all right, cool, we got a lot of bombs and we're using them all, right? Not to say that that's right, right?
Hmm.
I remember, and I feel bad about this, but I remember I was watching President Bush talk about how he was going to attack, and I remember thinking, oh man, yeah, let's do it, and now I'm ashamed of that attitude, right? Because
Really?
now 2020, what is it, hindsight is 2020,
Yeah.
right? Now I'm like, oh, so crazy, right? It's so crazy. Our man, uh Colin Powell, he just passed away. He sold us
A
the
bill of goods.
biggest, his biggest regret in life is that he sold us that narrative, and he was tricked, or
Yeah,
I don't know if he was tricked, but
He didn't want.
yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna say. I agree with you. I don't know if he. I don't think that he was tricked. I
Hmm.
think he didn't want to do it, but
Yeah,
but
he's a good
because of who
shoulder,
he was, he had to be the one to do it.
right? Yeah,
And so, like, he did it, but he didn't even believe it, and we found all that out later. But just
right.
the fact that he was the one who sold it, and the way that he sold it, yeah, that haunted him.
Yeah,
Haunted.
yeah. And so, you know it was, yeah, so I remember very clearly, and then being like, oh man, we were dummies, right? And look where we're at now, right? But you know what, when Obama came out down that hallway and told me that he had killed Osama Bin Laden, I was like, yes. I couldn't, like, I was so like, I was like, that's right, like, that's fucking right,
Andy, that is
gotcha.
so like. Did you hear what you said? You were like when he walked down that hallway and he told me like that
Yeah,
was so personal to you.
it
Like that
was
situation.
it was
Like to me, like I think of it as like he told the nation, but you were like, no, he told me.
It was like he was like speaking. It was like he was speaking right to me. Yeah, it's funny
Really?
because that was like a slip, but no, that's how it felt.
Uh huh.
It's how it felt, man. And it was like, man, we got you, we got you.
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Like I was had. Ooh, ooh. Okay. So it sounds
Mhm,
really bad to say that. Oh, we kill someone. Like our government kills someone. It sounds really
mhm,
bad, right? But at the same time, like I felt relieved because
mhm.
this could happen again. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? If given the right circumstances. And so I was relieved to find out that
Yeah.
that's happening.
I was relieved that the actual guy that hurt us was being hit, right? Because we launched into this war um, against a country where all the guys that did it were from a completely different country. It's like, wait a minute, right?
Hmm. Well, we
Anyways,
were told that they had weapons of mass destruction and they were poised to use them
yeah,
and all that other good stuff. Um, and we believed it because we wanted to rid
yeah,
the world of whatever.
yeah.
We were emotional.
We were, yeah. It's and it's to come to bring it back full circle to Trek. Um, you know, we never get to see that side of Trek, right? Like maybe there's going to be a whole other series someday about the inner workings of the leadership, right? Like instead of being on a starship,
In
we're in
San
San Francisco,
Francisco.
and you see all the politics, the interplay,
I don't know if I
right?
want to see that though. I don't know.
I mean, if you get Aaron Sorkin to write it, I'll definitely watch it, right?
Well, I mean, that's interesting. Well, you know what? What if at the same time, while that show is happening, we're able to see other shows,
uh,
um, and it's all kind of happening at the same time, and those shows are linked to each other.
right.
Then I would want to watch it if that makes sense.
Oh, so like, are you saying like, okay, like we're not necessarily like focused in on a particular timeline, more or less like we get a show that explains why certain things happen in the other shows, or are you saying there's a new shows like we have a whole new set of shows and we get it's almost like you get focus here, but you could also have like these like satellite shows that
Exactly.
connect with them. Yeah.
Exactly. They're all connected. Kind of like for there was a moment when Next Generation and DS9 were kind of aligned, and well, you can't really say that with Voyager, but you felt like things were aligned. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And like if we had something like that, I had been ruminating about that for years and years and years, or even like a Starfleet Academy,
Hmm.
something like that. See the red shirts.
See the Richards. Yeah.
Just something like that, or like merge the red shirts with what your idea,
Hmm.
along with like some other show that they create. It would be nice to see like what goes on behind the scenes and the
Hmm.
implications long term.
Right. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I'm glad that we're going back to Discovery. I'm glad that we're in the future. Right. Finally, because every show was a prequel to the original series, or like, sorry, I think we just had an earthquake or a sonic boom. Elon Musk must be landing a rocket. So,
Where do you live, by the way?
I live in Southern California, about 60 miles inland from the ocean.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, okay, all right. No aftershocks.
No, no. I think that might have been a sonic boom. Um, Maybe the rocket they sent out yesterday coming back in. Anyways, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I forgot what we were talking about, to be
Yeah.
honest.
That's
Yeah.
all right, man. So, I think we're in the what if section, right? Of our
Yeah, really. Like,
Yeah,
I think we can go back, press rewind, and be like, "This is our what if contribution."
yeah. My biggest what if that I can think about right now is and this is seeing the I think somebody already talked about it or brought it up. What if the doctor shows up in our Discovery in Discovery's um current timeline?
Zimmerman
Zimmerman, yeah,
or just Doc.
or the doctor.
Um, that would be interesting. That would be
Like,
interesting. An
because
aged doctor.
that's true. Or Picard. Now that
Or Picard.
Picard's a robot, right?
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
that'd be cool.
yeah. All these things are possible. All these
Yeah,
things are possible. It
yeah.
would be cool. It would be cool.
What if Picard is Section 31?
Don't say that.
Ooh. What if
Don't say that.
what if we discover Picard is the head of Section 31 in our current
Don't say that.
timeline?
I firmly believe that the Federation president Relic is Section 31.
hmm You know what's funny? They were trying to defend her, and I'm like, nah, man. I was on board with you. She's evil. She's evil. They don't make you like. Look, I'm gonna get blamed of being a broken record. She was her look was designed to look like Seska. I don't care what anybody says,
Okay.
right? Because Star Trek's really good. Trek is really good with doing that, where they like look at like we were talking offline. Look at the Sloan character, right? That guy just has resting asshole face, right? Like he's like they're like I want to see I wish they had the casting tape, right? They were like, no, he looks too decent. Get this asshole out of my out of get him out of this room. And then when that guy walked in, they're like, oh, I don't even care if he can act, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he just looks evil. And so Relic, when I saw her, man, I was like, when the thing about it was when we saw her. Okay, this is what did it. When we saw her, it didn't hit me right away. It wasn't until she was on the bridge, and she was wearing that flowy dress. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I wasn't paying attention to what she looked like. But please continue.
So she has the kind of the look. It's like she looks like Seska at like 30 feet, right? But it was the dress where it had the flowing dressiness, just like Seska wears in somewhere in Voyager, maybe once or twice. And when you put those two elements together, I was like I was that meme where he's looking, and I was like, that's
That's
and they're
it.
doing it on purpose.
Hmm.
I think they're doing it on purpose. But,
Look, so okay, so yes, in my mind, let me tell you because I never really got a chance to explain what I was thinking. People
mhm.
just kept interrupting. What I was thinking was this: look, there's a reason why they chose that she be half Cardassian, half
Right.
Bajoran, and then I shouldn't say half, but a third of those three species, right? And so I firmly believe that there's a part of her that wants to do. You do bad things because you have good intentions.
Mhm.
Okay, let's start off there. And I think that the Cardassian side of her is going to be what we end up seeing later in the show. I think she has great intentions. I really do believe that. But I think that that is what we're going to see later. And I think that because she's so strategic, because she's a Cardassian, right?
Mhm.
She's thinking 5, 10, 15 moves ahead, right? And when
Right.
we're
Mhm.
a lot of times as humans, we're in the present, right? We might think 2 or 3 moves ahead. She's on 15, right? Um, and because of that, I think things are going to happen in this show, right? And I don't think that we're the only ones who see that. I think a lot of people see it. I think, or at least the seed of it has been planted, and I think we're going to see what happens later on. I think though that there's redemption for her. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying?
Maybe, yeah.
But I definitely think that when I say she's the devil, that was hyperbole. Yes, on the main show, I'm not going to admit that. Like she's the devil, but it was hyperbole. It was hyperbole.
Yeah, I mean they definitely set it up for there to be a clash between her and Burnham, right? And I think what this season is going to be about is control for Discovery. And correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so Burnham realizes that she's Starfleet. She's been through Starfleet training, right? Which is really interesting because if you go back and look, she's questioning. They go through that whole part where she's questioning her decisions, right? And in the middle of like this huge chaos where minutes and seconds matter, and she's stopping her to question her. And but then we discover she's Starfleet, and it's like, is she really Starfleet? Because the Starfleet Starfleet training would be like, no, trust the captain, trust the crew, and let's make sure we all get home. So I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm on Team Evil. I'm on Team She's evil, and I don't trust her. And maybe at the end she'll realize, we'll get like, oh, like at the last 15 minutes of the season, she'll do the right thing, right? Maybe.
Well, good. This is a good place for us to stop. I
Yeah.
can't believe that this has been a whole hour. It felt like about 15 minutes. I had so much fun listening to you, talking to you, bouncing ideas off of you. But look, we get to do this all over again next week when we get to do a deep dive into a specific episode titled, help me out because this looks like Latin, Inter Arma Enum Silent Legis. So it's another DS9 episode. So you and I, we will have the distinct honor of just breaking that particular episode down.
Yeah. So, yeah, looking forward to it. So this is released on Saturdays. So I'm gonna pretend like I've already had some turkey and I'm sleepy. Oops. Uh, because we definitely already ate that turkey, right, Julian?
Well, I think looking back, I think what they want to do is they want to air this like a week after basically Thanksgiving. So
Okay.
yeah, it's into
Oh,
December.
so it's almost
Um,
Christmas.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're like ahead of the game. We'll have like two episodes in when they
Yeah.
have one. So we're
Nice.
good. All right. So again, thank you so very much. Peace and blessings to all of you all who had the opportunity to watch this from beginning to the end. I want to remind you, please like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Peace.